The search for a new superintendent moves into the final stretch. Jacksonville's Skyway 2.0 rolls over budget and behind schedule. The city's downtown development chief gets a vote of confidence, and the Laura Street Trio gets another bite at the redevelopment apple. And a slate of new Florida laws includes a ban on mandatory water breaks for outdoor workers. We're talking about all of that and more with our all-star panel of journalists on our Friday Week in Review. You can join the conversation on air by calling us at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. You can also watch the live stream right now on Facebook and YouTube. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Witness testimony continues today in former President Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial in New York. Prosecutors are building their case that Trump violated campaign finance law. Adult film actress Stormy Daniels testified for more than 7 hours this week about her alleged affair with Trump. NPR's Jimena Bustillo has more.
Jurors this week heard testimony from Daniels, who received a $130,000 settlement and signed a non-disclosure agreement in 2016 to keep quiet about an alleged affair with Trump in 2006. They heard from former Trump Organization employees about the process for mailing personal checks to the Trump White House for him to sign. Then they heard from Madeleine Westerhout, who worked in the Trump White House. She testified to receiving checks and having him sign them and mailing them back. These are the checks the district attorney argues were false business records. Still left to testify as a key witness is Michael Cohen, Trump's then lawyer. Prosecutors will not be calling former Playboy model Karen McDougal, another woman with a settlement. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, New York.
Police continue to clear protester encampments against Israel's war in Gaza at college campuses around the U.S. Several people were arrested as police cleared camps from the University of Pennsylvania and MIT early this morning, and several people from both schools were arrested. Student Quinn Perrion is an organizer of MIT Jews for Ceasefire.
Weaponizing anti-Semitism to try to get student protesters, people's fellow students, arrested, suspended, evicted. We know that that's a dangerous slope, not just because it harms the students, but because it cheapens anti-Semitism.
Around 2,500 people have been arrested at the protests around the country over the past couple of weeks. A new report finds that guns are stolen from cars at 3 times the rate they were a decade ago. That's according to a new report from the nonprofit Everytown for Gun Safety. NPR's Meg Anderson reports the findings are important because stolen guns are often used in other crimes.
The Everytown report analyzes FBI crime data from more than 300 cities across 44 states. In 2022, more than 100,000 guns were reported stolen, and half of those were taken from cars, often parked outside the owner's home. The researchers pointed to a trend in the data. Cities in states with stronger gun control laws tended to see fewer gun thefts. According to the report, several cities in Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey reported no gun thefts from cars at all. Each of those states requires firearms to be locked up. On the other hand, the 3 cities with the highest rates of guns being stolen from cars, Memphis, Atlanta, and St. Louis, are in states that do not have secure storage laws. Meg Anderson, NPR News.
Less than a half hour to go to the opening bell on Wall Street, and U.S. futures contracts are trading higher. You're listening to NPR News.
And this is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. It's 4 minutes after 9 o'clock. 77 degrees here in Jacksonville. Dark and cloudy outside now as we look for a dangerous line of thunderstorms to approach our area. Becoming very windy now. These strong and severe storms will move through northeast Florida and southeast Georgia. The risk for damaging storms will stay elevated through the day, but by tonight, conditions should settle down. Quiet weather is expected for Saturday and Sunday. After seeing a surge of deaths in 2021 and 22, the number of manatees dying in Florida continues to drop. As of May 3rd, Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission statistics show 246 sea cows had died in Florida waters so far this year. That totals nearly 3 times lower than the record pace of 2021. That's when 1,100 manatees died, many due to starvation related to a lack of seagrass to eat. Beyond starvation and red tide, the top cause of death is watercraft collisions. Save the Manatee Club Executive Director Patrick Rose says it's important for Florida boaters to give the animals space.
If you are in an area where there are manatees, look out for them. If you're operating your boat, look for them, slow down, and take precautions so as not to strike them. If you see a sick or injured manatee, though, really should call that in.
And again, we have rain and thunderstorms on tap for today. 90% chance some of these storms severe. Highs in the upper 80s for this afternoon.
Support for NPR comes from Ooma, a cloud-based phone service for any size business with an automated virtual receptionist, video meetings, and other features to connect to customers and coworkers anywhere at ooma.com/NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and it's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Today, we are talking about all the top headlines of the week with our panel of journalists. I'm going to introduce them here to you. We have a first-timer with Tiffany Salome from News4JAX. Welcome, Tiffany.
Happy to be here.
Jasmine Monroe, my former colleague at First Coast News, anchor and reporter. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, everyone.
And investigative reporter and attorney Claire Goforth from the Daily Dot. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
And Emily Turner from Action News Jax. Welcome, and thanks for being here this morning.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we've got a lot of topics to talk about this morning. We're going to be kicking off with a subject that is actually kind of breaking overnight. The search for a school superintendent kind of narrowing down. But just last night, there was a letter that was sent to local school officials from the Commissioner of Education, Manny Diaz, about an issue that has been in the news, yet another sex scandal at Douglas Anderson School of the Arts. So what do we know, Jasmine, right now about what this letter means for local school officials? I mean, this is additional pressure on the school district from the state, and it seems like this ongoing issue of, leaving teachers in the classroom without removing them is a problem.
I think that was something that everyone, as soon as this came out in the news, every parent was upset. They wrote letters, they spoke out. This action should have been taken swiftly, but unfortunately it did not, especially in the eyes of Diaz. So in this letter, he pretty much just basically stated the amount of incidents that had happened. And he spelled out there were 73 cases to the Florida Department of Education and the Office of Professional Practices and their services in the case that dated back to 2020. That's quite some time ago for this, information to be coming out when it comes to the school district, even speaking in the spotlight of the superintendent. There is a lot of eyes on the Duval County right now to make a decision and making the right decision. So even for these two new superintendents, the candidates that are coming up, it's Dr. Daniel Smith and Dr. Chris Benar, the two final candidates for the school superintendent position. Smith previously served as a chief of staff of Loudoun County Schools, and Bernier was the superintendent of Lee County Schools. They asked them the questions. I thought that this was something unique. They asked them the questions to address the lower enrollment. But I also feel like it's when you're coming into something like that, they're going to have to deal with that face value.
It was a question of mine, Emily. I mean, this is a really diverse school district. Initially, two of the school board members had proposed a third possible candidate, a black woman, but the two finalists right now are two white men. And that's in a district that's, 60 or 70% non-white. Is the community concerned about that? Is that even one of the discussions that's being had in terms of the suitability of one of these candidates to be the next leader?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that people are looking at and thinking at. Whether it's television or leadership in the schools, you want people that look like you, who understand you, who are going to be compatible with your thoughts and ideas, and at least empathetic with whatever it is you're facing. And so that is a concern among many. This is a job, boy, I'm glad I'm not in education, because can you imagine, not only are you dealing with the Department of Education right now and what they say is DCPS's failure to notify the state about fundamental criminal issues happening in our classrooms, but you're also dealing with this fight between charter schools and, traditional schools, and coming on the heels of dipping enrollment. I mean, this is a big job, and you've got to be up to the task.
It's interesting, Claire, one of the candidates, Dr. Chris Bernier, is coming from another Florida district in Lee County. He actually announced he was resigning immediately after the district, the voters there decided they wanted to go to an elected superintendent position instead of an appointed one. And I think that really speaks to, you have somebody that's been in education for their whole life, really not wanting to traverse into the political landscape and become a candidate, and immediately saying, I'm out.
Yes, I did notice that when I was researching for the show today. It's really not, in his view, he doesn't want it to be in politics. He doesn't want to have a political job, but it's really hard to divorce politics from education in America, and
in Florida.
especially in Florida.
In
I
Florida.
mean, look at what the state has been doing, cracking down and trying to enforce all of these weird restrictions on what you can and can't teach. And, that awful thing about teaching that slavery was somewhat beneficial to some people. I mean, these type of things, you want to see a superintendent push back on, and you want to see a superintendent who's going to be willing to engage in those sort of issues. So the question on many minds is whether or not Bernier is going to be willing to do so.
I just wanted to pop in on that one, because I was in California for 7 years, and the state head of education is an elected position as opposed to here where it's an appointed position. And I covered that race. At the same time, there was a Senate race, right? So it was when Kamala Harris was running for that Senate seat. But the race for the education director was outspent, that Senate race, like far and away, because you were either a charter school candidate or you were a traditional school candidate. And people feel very strongly about that. And when you make something like education political, it just changes the dynamics completely.
100%. And Tiffany, I mean, we know that education is a very political topic here in Florida. It certainly must winnow the pool of people who would want to take on this role. And clearly we've seen this is the second time that the school district has even opened up a search because they couldn't get enough qualified candidates the first time.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting. Last time they had 20 applicants, I believe, and none of them were up to par. So it's interesting now that we had a smaller amount of people, but the people who I think were presented had the experience. And I did speak with people in the community in covering the search for a superintendent. And I know we talked about it earlier about a woman of color being in this position, someone that looks like me, someone who understands my struggles. I think it's interesting that they came back with these two candidates, but of course they do have the experience. And we saw their video and written responses last week talking about what they would do to change the school district. And I think all of them really had great things to say, but it'll come down to, one or the other. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I think if I'm not mistaken, one of the commissioners mentioned that the reason why they put her name inside of the hat was just in case one of those two people, if they were to drop out, then we're just stuck with one person. So I did believe that made a better deal for them to have three people instead of two. But I guess, on May 23rd, we will find out.
Right. One of the things I wanted to ask about too is I noticed that I don't know if am I saying his name correctly, Bernier or Bernier?
I'm not sure.
It's Bernier.
It's Bernier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Had this discussion.
Yeah.
One of his personal recommendations is Manny Diaz. That's one of the people that is on his resume as, kind of a reference. I would wonder, Jasmine, how that impacts the board's decision. I mean, if they're getting all this heat from Manny Diaz, as we said just last night, he's sending another one of these letters putting pressure on the district. Would they find that to be an asset to have somebody in their wheelhouse that is, has a friend in Manny Diaz?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, especially if he's writing these letters, bringing attention to the school district, I think it's just something to think about. Even if, if they're working together, it's always good when you have somebody, a partner in crime to do this, together. School district, I say it all the time, we're in Teacher Appreciation Week. It's amazing what these teachers do. I can only imagine the amount of pressure a superintendent has to deal with when it comes to making decisions, switching things, and going in a completely different direction from the previous administrators. So
the problem is, how long is he going to have him as an ally? Because it's an appointed position and Ron DeSantis is termed out. So you're going to put your eggs in that basket, and then maybe we get a completely different governor with a completely different methodology, and all of a sudden now you've got to interface with someone on the other side.
I want to ask you, Emily, because you've been doing some reporting too. I mean, we talk about the pressures on the school leaders, but the pressures on the teachers are obviously no small thing. And you've been doing some reporting about just the physical threats that teachers experience. Tell us a little bit about what your reporting found.
Well, so this kind of started post-COVID, where I was hearing anecdotally from friends of mine who are in education that, like, kids are out of control. So I pulled what's called Sessor data, which is the way the state tracks violence and other crimes in our schools. And it skyrocketed after the pandemic. But there's not a way that the state tracks violence against teachers. They just kind of track it generally. So we partnered up with a bunch of our sister stations and we did a survey. And in Florida, we got more than 2,500 educators responding to our survey. And of the teachers who responded, more than half of them have been the victim of violence in their classroom, and just under half have been the victim of violence more than once. And if you talk about verbal abuse, it was almost universal. And there are really impactful ramifications to this, because we also surveyed them about whether they were scared to go to classrooms, and they said yes. 58% said they've thought about leaving, either retiring or quitting early because of violence specifically. And that has massive ramifications to everyone in education.
Yeah, Tiffany, it's hard to imagine, going to a job every day where you feel physically in peril.
Yeah, and there's definitely a shortage for teachers right now. I can't imagine, why many people would stay if they're, a victim of violence, especially in the classroom.
We're the lowest paying state, too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's so many issues there. And we see teacher shortages and we ask, well, why don't they want to be in the classroom? And I feel like there's no shortage of issues that point to the reasons why.
For something so important, too.
Absolutely. They're teaching the youth.
We've got a call from Rick on the north side. Good morning. Welcome to First Coast Connect.
Yes, good morning. How are you?
Well, go ahead.
I was just want to ask a real quick question. Being as though both the candidates are partners with Manny Diaz, do y'all think that's going to tip the scale in his favor? And that'll be my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I mean, that is sort of what we touched on, Jasmine. And I guess, it remains to be seen. I mean, it's not a, homogenous school board in terms of their positions politically. There is a lot of diversity of opinion there. Any thoughts on that, Claire?
Well, I mean, the school board has certainly become more political in the past couple of cycles. And certainly there are some members of the school board who are further right than maybe in the past. And so, yeah, that will be interesting to see if it factors in that Manny Diaz is, in the DeSantis camp and that they want to have their guy in, based on that ideology.
We should note that the school superintendent, there's a meet and greet for people who want to have an opportunity to get to know or weigh in on that really important decision. It's Monday, May 13th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Everbank Stadium. And the board is due to make a decision about early June. Is that right? June 4th?
They hope to have them in office at July 1st.
Okay.
Is what I was told. But I would also, parents who are listening up out there, take advantage of this opportunity, because you want to know who is running your school district. I get a chance to speak to teachers all the time, parents all the time, and you can't complain if you're not attending these meetings. Like I say all the time, I'm standing on journalism is so important. You don't know what happens in these meetings if we're not there. We try to cover it as, fair and balanced as possible, but for you to hear and see those superintendents that's going to be leading your children's school district, that may not look like you, that may not have the same views as you can make that difference.
And the school superintendent, whoever it is, I mean, this is an opportunity for them to get direct community feedback about what they care about, and it will help shape the direction that they move. So, well, we're talking about the week's big headlines with our panel of journalists, and we invite you to join the conversation. You can call us at 904-549-2937. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. And you can also watch our live stream right now. It's on Facebook and YouTube. Let's move on to a story now that you reported, Emily Turner. It has to do with JTA's multi-million-dollar effort to transform the city's skyway system into an autonomous vehicle network. It's called the Ultimate Urban Circulator, or U2C.
Yep.
What did your reporting find?
Well, this has been my life for several months.
I love it.
Basically, the Ultimate Urban Corridor has multiple different phases, the first of which is what's called the Bay Street Innovation Corridor. And that is a 3.2-mile loop where what was promised is a 3.2-mile loop going around Bay Street to the stadium, to the JRTC in La Villa, and back.
That's the JRTC.
The Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center. So where JTA is, where the Skyway goes. So kind of like a loop downtown in the urban core where autonomous vehicles would be riding around in designated lanes with all of these great improvements to transportation, whether it's like a crossing or flood sensor or whatever. But what I found is what's promised is not what's happening. Number one, it was supposed to be $44 million. The budget now is at $65.5 million. And we haven't even broken ground on this thing. The contract shows it should have broken ground February of last year. At this point, they just announced, as I started digging, they just announced a groundbreaking for May, the end of this month. They're not actually going to be autonomous vehicles. They're going to be like not so autonomous vehicles because there are stipulations in the contract with the federal grant that means they have to be made in America and they have to obviously be street legal. Well, number one, a fully autonomous vehicle is not street legal. Number two, there is no company in America that makes a vehicle they can use. So their workaround is a Ford E-Transit, okay, the same thing that like UPS drives, that they're going to outfit with an autonomous vehicle kit that still has to have a driver behind the wheel because you legally are required to do that. And there are all sorts of other rollbacks that they've done with regards to this project that's over budget, way behind schedule, and under delivering. And they would not even sit down with me for an interview to talk about how great it is while they're continuing to move forward on this.
And you reached out to not just JTA, but to a number of stakeholders. I think your reporting said you tried 45.
45.
Yeah. So what kind of response did you get?
Boy, it was really disappointing, the lack of accountability here. And anybody who's a voter should probably be knocking on the door, sending an email, or making a call. The only people who were willing to go on the record about it, not even JTA themselves, but Matt Carlucci, who's in favor of it.
City council member
Matt Carlucci, who's in favor of it. Angie Nixon, who initially state rep said she was in favor of it, but when I showed her all of the like more than 30 public records I've pulled in my JTA saga, changed her mind and sent a statement saying she was concerned and she's not sure this is a great thing for taxpayers.
And reached out herself.
And she reached out to JTA for a meeting. They never called her back until my web story posted and said they never called her back. And that day they finally called her for a meeting. And then Rory Diamond and Jimmy Peluso, opposite sides of the aisle, city councilmen, opposite sides of the aisle, agree on this one thing miraculously. And they think they don't like it. They don't want it. They want it to be done. They want to kill it dead in the water. Everybody else, some of them maybe responded, some said I don't know enough, but there was a significant and profound silence of just city council members who didn't even bother to acknowledge my request. And the thing about it is, our local option gas tax in the later phases will fund this program if it continues to move forward, and council voted in favor of it. So, you should know about the project. You should respond. This is your job.
Yeah, that gas tax was doubled under the former administration under Mayor Lenny Curry, which is a surprising tax hike for a conservative Republican, Claire. But about 40% of that is earmarked for this Skyway, revisioning.
It was originally more, and then they rolled some off for the Emerald Trail.
So that money is, our tax dollars at work. Skyway
at work doing what though? Because it sounds like it's not much. I mean, what they said they've spent more than 91% of the $17 million so far, and that's our local money, and it's just groundbreaking. I mean,
and I got word yesterday, by the way, that the $17 million that's been spent total on what is
Some
actually
vans.
it's actually that's just Q1 of 2024 as of December. That's actually closer to $19 million now.
Mm-hmm.
And a significant portion of that has been put into promotional material.
I mean, and
So are they? I'm sorry to cut you off. Is it the wrap? You're saying that there was a kit that's going to.
Have you not seen? Have you seen all the renderings?
Yes.
And all the fancy.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
boy, we're real good at renderings in this
Jacksonville
town.
loves
Oh,
a
yeah.
And that
rendering.
was
A good love of renderings.
something that I was told when I first moved here. It's the rendering city.
Oh, man.
You know,
So
it's just unfortunate. But I do start to see new things like the Four Seasons popping up downtown too as well. But just even looking at it, it looks so futuristic. And I think one of the people that you did get a chance to interview, he said like some of the technology is not even created yet.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? And that's right. I did talk to Rockman Johnson, Councilmember Rockman Johnson, who was the most staunch reporter, and he even himself said that the technology's not there. But we're gonna hang a ton of local money on this. But the other thing I was going to say about local money is because of these grants, it's made up of federal and state and local money. Well, if we don't get reimbursed from the federal government by this like drop dead date, if whatever money we've paid out, local taxpayers are going to be on the hook for that.
Because we won't get reimbursed.
Because we won't get reimbursed. And that money doesn't just like go back
away.
to the DOT. It's like goes back into the treasury and disappears. And it doesn't matter if like you've put in your invoice to get reimbursed. If it's not already in our bank account, it is gone.
Tiffany, it picks up on a kind of unfortunate legacy of the original Skyway. So that I think that Emily found that this project breaks down to about $20 million per mile. But the original Skyway actually cost $36 million per mile. And at the time there was reporting, I think it was by NBC, that found it would be cheaper to pay for individual taxis for the riders over the life of that monorail instead of building it. So there is a kind of a project that a lot of people regarded as a boondoggle at the time, now being replaced by something that in Emily's reporting, that was actually the word that Rory Diamond used to describe it, as a boondoggle. Are people going to be accepting of this project if it is falling so far short of the promise?
Oh, I don't think so. And I don't think it's surprising either. When you go downtown, what do we hear? I mean, does anyone use the monorail? I know people are using JTA transportation, but at the same time, this is a lot of money we're talking about. So it's really concerning that people aren't being accountable about, why we're doing this. What's the benefit of doing this? Are we just having fun? I don't know. There's a lot of questions.
There are a lot of trips that JTA has taken in the name of this project. They've gone to Vegas. They've hosted an autonomous vehicles day. They have a new one coming up that I signed up for that they're offering food and drink. So I'm going. I'm there for the free food. But the thing about it is phase 2 is in peril now too, which is the gas tax one. They signed a contract with HNTV. Well, they approved to sign the contract with the contractor. And then in March, pulled it. So there's no one, they don't even have a company in place to design the transition from the Skyway to this autonomous vehicle roadway now.
It's really great reporting, great accountability reporting. So what you said that you kind of got a leaked memo, I believe, that there was going to be kind of a performative groundbreaking or a ceremonial start to the project.
Yeah, I mean, let me just say,
is that the free food and drink thing?
That's different. That's different. There's another event that JTA is paying for, and that's the groundbreaking, and it will be like kind of part of the autonomous vehicle stuff. But the and all of this, by the way, was kind of announced after I started digging into the U2C, this project to begin with. But in all of the years that I have worked as a journalist, I have never, in all of my years combined, even come close to the number of people that have come out of the woodwork to talk to me about JTA, either inside, adjacent, former employees who have come in contact with it. I mean, I got an email yesterday it's bad. And it's people who are just blowing the whistle on what their concerns are. But and part of that is these leaked memos. So every time I've done a story, of which now there have been 12, the CEO, Nat Ford, sends out a memo to his board, either trying to combat it or spin it or disprove it or whatever. And I've seen them all. And, it paints a picture of an agency that feels like their hair's on fire right now.
Yeah, and it sounds like they really aren't being held accountable except for by your reporting.
By anybody. It's blowing my mind. Now, the state is taking action. So as a result of my reporting, the state passed legislation, and we all know how hard that is. They passed legislation that will curb the amount of money they are allowed to spend at the administrative level because JTA is way out of whack on cost per mile. They're going to have to cut about $10 million. They haven't come up with the algorithm yet for FDOT, but people very well could lose their jobs with that. And in addition, they've put their grants in peril because they've changed the level of autonomous vehicle. And the governor has yet to make his board appointees. There's 2 of them that he can reappoint, but he has the ability to just clear the deck.
Yeah. We got a call from Jason in San Marco. Good morning, Jason. Go ahead.
Good morning. What incredible reporting. Thank you for the in-studio guest. I don't quite have her name here on my note sheet, but she's doing an amazing job.
Thank you.
Emily Turner. Emily Turner is her name.
Emily. Thank you, Emily. Emily needs to be on every news channel on the TV as well. She needs to, we need to make that happen, and you need to connect with Nate Monroe because this is the quintessential story of throwing good money after bad. The existing elevated train down there is just this sad, long-running joke that never ends. We cannot go forward to UTC. There's no appetite for it. There's no room in the budget for it. Last time I checked, we're going to have to move the jail to accommodate Shad Khan's beautiful luxury hotel he wants to build about a block away from the stadium. And I don't think we can have our jail a block away from a Four Seasons. There is no room in the budget for this. I really hope the mayor gets it together. She's got a lot on her plate. And I just want to say that the previous mayor, the 8-year previous mayor, supposedly was an accountant. That was his professional calling, and he's left us with a lot of unfinished books that are just going to come back to haunt the citizens for decades. That's my call, and thank you for taking it.
Thank you so much, Jason. Emily.
Yeah, so it's interesting he brings up the mayor. So the mayor didn't respond to my most recent request.
You're talking about the current mayor.
The current mayor, Mayor Donna Deegan, did not respond to my most recent request about the Bay Street Innovation Corridor. I have, however, throughout my entire reporting, asked for feedback. Like, what do you think? Are you happy with the job the board is doing? Because they're the ones that you appoint that are supposed to hold him accountable. What do you think of this project? Because it's city money. The last report I did before this one was internal emails I exposed from the Florida Department of Transportation where they said, we don't like the scope. This isn't going to work. You're not going to move people around. It's too expensive. And I asked for a comment, and they doubled down. The mayor's office was like, we still think that this is a good job. And in the past, Donna Deegan on camera has said she thinks that Nat Ford is an innovator, and she used to work for JTA.
He's the head of JTA.
Yeah, Nat Ford, the CEO of JTA. But it's in fact, I found an old Makin' Moves show, which is the show JTA pays for. She used to host it after she worked at First Coast News, and there's a whole episode about this. And so she's clearly a proponent of it, though she hasn't weighed in recently.
We got a call from Mary Ann in Arlington. Good morning, Mary Ann. Go ahead.
Good morning. Hi. This is the first time I've called in to the show, but this is an issue that is very close to, our hearts as a taxpayer. My husband had to use JTA transportation for a year and a half when we first moved here to Jacksonville. He would actually ride his bicycle up to the bus stop and then catch the bus straight in down Wonderwood into Mayport because he was working at Mayport. And JTA needs to work on what they've got in their hands right now, which is more buses, more accessibility, and more on time. He was late sometimes. He would sometimes miss the bus coming home. It's like all this money that they want to spend on something that's just going to be, a tourist attraction that nobody gets on is just absolutely ridiculous. And thank you so much for the reporting that Emily has done. It needs to be, like the previous caller said, far and wide so that we can get JTA held more accountable for this money they're spending.
Thanks so much, Mary Ann. We also have a message from Franklin on Facebook. He says, glad someone is finally investigating this. It needs to get more traction. The city of Jacksonville deserves better public transportation. We also have a call from Brad at the Beaches. Brad, go ahead.
Well, the other day you had the mayor on, and one of the comments that you always ask for people to comment on X. I wrote in to ask the mayor if she thought the JTA executive was overpaid. I believe the reporting Emily did shows that he makes more than the Chicago Transportation Authority, more than Boston or New York. How do we have school busing issues in Jacksonville and we have a JTA that has this much money? Can we not merge them together to help service students? I mean, I don't see in any way how our JTA is progressive or doing anything that sets us apart in our transportation. It's just no one believes in it, no one trusts it, and like the previous caller said, most of the time it doesn't show up or you're late.
Well, they think they're very innovative with this new project. That's their thing. And the ironic part about this is you talk about school buses, they're kind of siloed in their own deal. But I did a whole series on Student Transportation of America, which had 2/3 of our Duval County Public School students. And it was failing so miserably that JTA created this My Ride to School program. Well, they've had an astronomical number of students who are riding public school buses. And that's fantastic. Public buses. Yeah. But they're using that with their numbers, right? So JTA is claiming that their numbers are rebounding. But one of the reasons that they're rebounding, even at the rate they are, is because school buses are even that much more awful and unreliable.
They're taking on that responsibility. Interesting. We have a call from, we have a comment from Elizabeth via email. She says, who do we contact and can the money be directed elsewhere? Thank you, Emily.
So the way that it works, the feds could pull the funding, the state could pull the funding. That's up to the Department of Transportation, both federally and local and at the state level. I have found that there are violations of the contract already that would make that possible, but that's not my gig. That's not for me to decide. And there will likely have to be lots of attorneys involved in that. Now, with regards to the gas tax, it's interesting, and the only reason I know this is because the JTA board talked about funneling the gas tax that's earmarked for the Emerald Trail, now that we have that big federal grant, to funnel it away from the Emerald Trail to capital projects. And so, according to the council auditor, they're allowed to do that as long as it's transportation related. So, yeah, I mean, the board did my work for me, but I guess they can take the money from the U2C and put it towards something else that would be transportation related. But the situation there is JTA still owns that pot. So JTA owns the U2C project. They own the Emerald Trail project. So they'd still be in charge of managing that money.
It's really important reporting, Emily, and we're really glad that you're able to be here today to talk about it.
Sorry to monopolize the time on JTA. I could go all day.
It's very interesting.
You've
done a great job.
A lot of accountability that still needs to happen around that story. We're talking about the top stories of the week with our panel of journalists. You can join our conversation by giving us a call at 904-549-2937, or you can reach out on social media. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I want to get to another couple issues. One is the issue of downtown. Claire, the head of the Downtown Investment Authority, got a vote of confidence from her board. It appears they're poised to extend her contract by another couple of years. At the same time, we're hearing that there's another shot that the Laura Street Trio has, another bite at the apple, with another proposal for redeveloping those three important historic buildings.
Yes, it'll be very interesting to see if that actually does happen. I've lived in Jacksonville since 2005. I have not seen very much of anything go on with the Laura Street Trio, and they have been trying to work out a deal with Southeast since 2017. That failed. In 2021, it failed. And now they have a new one. And, it's a lot of public money, almost $22 million grant at the front end from the city. That, Lori Boyer, who's the head of DIA, says we're going to make sure that they're going to spend it properly. But a lot of people, there have been rumblings for a while now that Lori Boyer isn't, some developers and lobbyists really aren't a fan of her. I mean, during the previous mayoral administration, they were considering getting rid of her. And then the board comes out and they just give her this glowing review. And then I think to myself, I've lived here a very long time. And I remember what Jacksonville was like when I first lived here, downtown. And you will be surprised to believe
was it like?
It was fun. There were things to do.
Landing.
You could walk around. The landing was there. The landing was very happening at the time. And over the time, and I know not all of this is Lori Boyer's fault. We had the pandemic. There were a lot of other factors that have changed what's gone down downtown, but it is just consistently gotten worse. The experience of being downtown just degrades every single year, it seems. And now I'm sure we've got the Four Seasons. That's going to happen. Yes, for sure. Right. Maybe the Laura Street Trio will happen. Maybe something with what I now call the Landing, the former landing. You know, downtown has so much potential, but it's like you go to Tampa and you see a city that has a similar riverfront, and it is a blast. There's so much to do. People are out walking, having a great time, and then you come home and you're like, well, I guess I could go to Daly's place, and then maybe I could get a sandwich somewhere. And then that's about it. I mean, and I feel bad for the businesses downtown, but, you know, it's just distressing to see what's happened over the past almost 20 years that I've lived here to downtown Jacksonville.
Honestly, to me, especially in the last, like, let's just say 3 or 4 years, we have had massive issues with JEA. We have had issues that I've uncovered with JTA, the Housing Authority, the Downtown Investment Authority. Jacksonville is set up with this hierarchical system that's meant to be democratic, where it's like, okay, these leaders appoint a board that are supposed to be accountable, and then you can kind of like diversify and divide and conquer. And all we've seen over the last 4 years is failure after failure after failure. Not all we've seen, let me be fair, but we've seen quite a few significant and very costly failures with this the system that we've got in place.
Sure, the Children's Commission had problems all over the place as
And
well.
a lot of observers would liken it to what the late great journalist Marvin Edwards called the syndicate, which is a reference to the sort of ruling class in Jacksonville that seems to feel as though they have the knowledge and the authority to control all of these different levers and all of these different sort of facets of the city life and ignore the will of the rest of us, the majority, who don't happen to be in that moneyed class.
Well, look, I mean, it's really nice. JTA went on their board retreat to One Ocean, so, you know, it's a good gig if you can get it.
Jasmine, I want to just pivot a little bit to talk about the Laura Street Trio. This proposal would basically be asking for about almost $50 million in cash grants from the city. Another $22 million in preservation loans. So it's a good chunk of change. But in the light of, you know, all the projects that the city finances, including the $130 million that we're giving to the Four Seasons, $30 million that we're giving to the new Riverside One Riverside building,
Maybe the stadium too.
Well, certainly that. Yeah. Is there a sense that the city, that the taxpayers are just kind of resigned having to pay for downtown development?
I feel like the taxpayers want it. They just want to see it. You know, they get the renderings and then nothing happens, or you know, I don't want to assume, but you know, I'm just new here. That's all I say. I'm new here. I'm learning this city. But comparing this to Cleveland, the downtown life has tremendously changed for the city of Cleveland, and it was because of the government downtown, the mayor. We went from a mayor who was, I think, Mayor Frank Jackson was there for a good 8 years in office, and then a new mayor came in, and he's a younger mayor, and he started making changes, big changes, upset a lot of people, and then things happen. Downtown, when you think about Cleveland, I ask people all the time, we were just talking about there, do you know the old Cleveland or the new Cleveland? Because it's a place that you want to be. I live downtown. I feel safe downtown when I lived in Cleveland. Here in this city, in Jacksonville, I look downtown, but there's no grocery store. You can't go to the grocery store downtown. Even sidewalks, walking around, there's nowhere to go that you want to stay and look or bring people or brag about in this city. And that's unfortunate. And, you know, seeing all these different ideas that are supposed to be coming and taxpayers paying for these new ideas, and even, you know, JTA, comparing that to Cleveland, RTA, that there was a whole big thing. You should look into that too as well. It's shocking to see the amount of movement that doesn't happen when certain people are in office.
Yeah. Tiffany, I want to move on and talk a little bit about some bills that were signed into law this week. A bunch moved by the governor. And I know one that you've covered is this so-called street takeover bill. Remind us what prompted that bill and what this new law allows for.
Yeah, so we at Channel 4, we talked about street racing a lot these past few years, and that's really what this bill stems from. and it enforces harsher penalties for people who aren't engaging in street racing. And many people think this is a win because really you could go down the street and see 10 cars in the middle of the night just booking it. And what's the penalty for them? What's deterring them from doing that? And it wasn't a lot. So now that we have this new law, you could be charged with a felony, and especially if you gather with more than 10 cars. So I think this is great, and we just have to wait and see if it's going to be enforced, right? Is this going to make a difference? There was also talk about a legal street racing facility in Nassau County. Hey, if you want to go street race legally, go do it here. So we'll see if that happens and if that makes a difference. But I hear from a lot of people who complain about street racing specifically in Jacksonville.
They had to add speed humps in my neighborhood because people were street racing a 3-mile straight stretch, which with stop signs, but they were not abiding by those stop signs in the middle of the night, which was incredibly loud. Houses are very close to the road in my neighborhood. An animal or a human could have very easily been killed.
Yes.
Another law that, or another bill that became law this week has to do with a ban on mandatory water breaks and shade breaks. So this bill was signed by the governor. It basically prohibits any local county, any local city from mandating that people who work outdoors get a water break and get a shade break. And Jasmine, I mean, obviously we know that this planet and certainly our state getting hotter all the time. We had a
Yesterday
taste of
was
that.
the
Yeah.
history we made was the hottest day of the year. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so in that framework, it almost seems like there would be additional protections that people would feel are needed as opposed to fewer.
I'm almost amazed that we had to even make this law, this bill, just because, I have friends who are in the industry, construction. The amount of times that we even ourselves just work through lunch and just keep going, and you don't even realize how long it's been. Like, oh my God, I didn't even eat yet. It's been 8 hours and I didn't even eat or go to the bathroom. So I think it's important to have it.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, this will not
does away with that.
Prohibits.
Yes.
Will prohibit that. Yeah, Tiffany, go ahead.
Oh, well, we do live shots outside in the summertime, and I think I stand outside maybe 30 minutes at a time, or sometimes it's longer than that. I got to go in the car. I need an AC break sometimes, and I get overheated. I mean, how are we going to say that if people are working outside, they can't take a 10-minute break every 2 hours? It's essentially what this law is saying. And I think Miami-Dade County was really the only county in Florida who had a law mandating breaks for people who work outside. So a lot of people have said that the governor, this is kind of a slap in the face to that county, like, he's trying to say, no, you can't do that. But I'd hope it's up to the individual employer.
Just put him outside.
Yeah, because I know I'm going to take a break if I'm working outside. So,
and to be clear, there is some federal language that OSHA has, but it's vague. It says that there have to be breaks, quote, long enough for workers to recover from the heat. It doesn't really specify what that means, and it doesn't require that employers give their workers time to drink water, even though they're required to provide water. But, this is still an agricultural state in a lot of parts, Claire.
It is. And I remember a Jaguars opening game a couple of years ago, even though they opened Daly's Place so you could get out of the sun, which I did take that opportunity to do. 100 people went to the hospital with heat issues. And those are people who are literally just sitting down at a football game, not people who are working very hard in the sun, in construction or in agriculture or any of the other number of trades that are outdoors in this state. I mean, this law just feels as though it's taking away the humanity of those people.
People die from heat exhaustion.
I've had heat exhaustion, not stroke, but it is a very serious. It is terrifying.
Yeah, I'm from Jacksonville, but I lived in Indiana for a little while. When I came back, I couldn't handle the summertime.
Yeah.
I was overheating really quick.
My first ever time was in Arizona, and I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Emily Turner, Tiffany Salome, Jasmine Monroe, and Claire Goforth, thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, a local initiative elevates new voices within the jazz tradition.
Congaree and Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. Serious injury cases are complex, and civil trial attorneys present the evidence juries need to see and hear. More at waynehogan.law.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Infertility and the pursuit of longevity. I'm Dr. Joe Servin. Join me tomorrow at 4 for What's Health Got to Do with It, only on WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville.
On the next Florida Roundup, struggling public schools. Some of the largest school districts in the state are dealing with closing schools, leadership changes, and fighting over state money. Florida ranks 50th in the nation in teacher pay in a new report. The state calls that ranking bogus. So what kind of shape are your public schools in? What's the future of the traditional public school? Email us radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Join us Friday at noon.
This week on the Roundup,
it's regrettable. It's not who we are as Americans, and we're better than this.
The Republican House Speaker is saved, but not by his own side. And school leaders push back on charges made by lawmakers that they tolerate anti-Semitism.
It's not about having gotcha moments. It's about teaching.
That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. That music you're hearing is a song called On Green Dolphin Street, and I'm joined now by the jazz percussionist you heard there on drums, Janae Yates. Welcome, Janae.
Hi, hello.
Hi, she's part of the Jazz Discovery series that kicks off tonight at the Jessie. I'm also joined by John Lumpkin, jazz artist and educator who's helped putting this together. Welcome, John.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I should say welcome back. So, Janae, what inspired your love for jazz, particularly percussion?
It started more so in middle school. I had never played drums before or anything. I went to La Villa School of the Arts, and they originally had me on euphonium, and I hated it. And so I was begging to switch to percussion, and then from there I auditioned for the jazz band, and then they showed us this video of this small film of the Douglas Anderson Band winning the Essentially Ellington competition in New York, and it's called Chops. And then from there, I obsessed because it was Jameson Ross on drums. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. And then from there, it just kind of exploded. I met Lumpkin while I was there as well, and he just kind of shaped me into what I'm doing now.
And Lumpkin, John Lumpkin here. So he was your mentor, is that right?
He still is my mentor. He took me in when I first started playing drums. I had no idea what I was doing. I think that was in 7th grade, and now I'm about to turn 22. So it's been a really long ride, but we made it.
Yeah. So you've seen her grow and change, John, I would guess. How was she as a mentee, and why is it important to you to be a mentor?
Oh, man. Well, as a mentee, she was just a sponge in terms of the information that I would give her, different transcriptions, but then also, too, extending from that, the life portion, which I'm also big with, and being a mentor and being able to impart into students and to young people my convictions, which is, you shouldn't just be a great musician, but you should also be a great person off the bandstand. So, yeah, those types of things and learning lessons, I was able to teach her and also teach others as well.
So that is a big part of what you do. This Jazz Discovery series that kicks off tonight.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what the kind of vision is for that series.
Well, the vision is very simple. It's about bringing jazz back to Jacksonville, and then also, too, impacting the community with the next generation of jazz artists. So we do that by way of not only having concerts, but also having master classes as well, to whereby which Janae today will be teaching a master class at the Jacksonville Arts and Music School from 4 to 5. And those students there will be able to learn from her. And then they also, too, at the same time, will be opening for her later on tonight. So, yeah, there's definitely a mentorship and mentee type of situation happening within this series as well.
Kind of bringing that full circle.
Yes.
So how does it, have you ever taught a master class before, Janae?
No, I don't think I've ever taught a master class before, but I've sat through so many, so I think it's sort of becoming just second nature, honestly.
What is it that you try to impart to your, the people that you're going to be teaching tonight? Anything that you've learned from John?
I just try to reflect that, like, it really is just a cycle. So I'm just repeating basically everything. If I'm repeating things that John has told me, I'm repeating things that Miss Lumpkin's probably been told himself. So it's just sort of feeding into just the next generation. Like, I'm the next generation, but then they're like right after me. So I think it's really important to just make sure they understand that you got to keep the lineage sort of intact throughout the entire process.
Amen.
And so what kind of jazz do you like to listen to and like to perform?
I listen to all kind of music, but I would say the thing that impacts what I listen to the most is mainstream media, and then also trying to tie that into how like jazz is right now. So the album I'm listening to right now is the new Kenny Garrett album, and I think it's called What is it? Something about AI?
Yeah,
chasing down AI or something, running down AI. It's like it's more so fusion. It's like a combination of jazz with technology, EDM sort of thing. So I think just listening to more music that combines the genres that you're interested in is the best thing you can do.
John, how can people get involved in this series if they want? I mean, just to see people play, but even to learn if they want to.
Oh, man, listen, you could go to our website, jazzdiscoveryseries.org. You can also follow us on Instagram, Jazz Discovery Series, Facebook as well. All of those resources there. And then also, too, it's nothing like face-to-face, if you will, in terms of being able to come out to the event and see the Jacksonville Arts and Music School and see the JL Institute and see the next generation.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
AEG presents Lyle Lovett and his large band live